morning. I know many of you have asked that I do read my version of the Mueller report. It is an accurate synopsis of Robert Mueller's report. It's written so that everyone can understand the indictment that he came up with against President Trump. I was so sure that his impeachment should be based on the Mueller report that I actually went to see Nancy Pelosi on June 21st, 2019, to plead my case and the case of all my followers, which there were over 10,000 at the time. I met her at AFL-CIO headquarters, and I asked her to please consider impeaching Donald Trump based on the Mueller report. Everything that is recounted in Volume 1 of the Mueller report has been documented in all of our newspapers. What wasn't documented is the extent that Donald Trump utilized Russia and WikiLeaks to further his cause. But that's getting ahead of myself. Why did I write this book? The synopsis for everyone on the Mueller report, called Shining a Light on the Mueller report. I wrote it because I had an overwhelming concern for our elections. I didn't like the idea that our elections would be tampered with, nor did I like the alliance that Trump had with Vladimir Putin. As you'll read in my book, Trump had a 30-year relationship with Vladimir Putin and the Russians going back from 2016. The Financial Times wrote an article that I've included in my book that says Trump's 30 years of Russian connections and details all those connections with Donald Trump. So it's not just a good friend or an ally. It is something much deeper between Trump and Putin. And I don't think to this day, which is now May of 2026, that Donald Trump's link to Putin has gotten weaker. Instead, I think his links to Putin have gotten stronger. Zelensky can't get between them. Nobody can. The link between Donald Trump and Putin is like this, and it was like this in 2016. And that's why I wrote the book, Shining a Light on the Mueller report. I said it was because I had traveled the country over 2 years prior to the first election, 2016, 2018. I was in Houston, Texas, canvassing for Beto O'Rourke. I helped get Doug Jones into office in Alabama. I helped get Warnocky and Ossoff into office, and many others, with help from friends around the country. I cared about our democracy, about our standard of living. And I write, my passion and concern for this country's overwhelming issues of the day have made me acutely aware that this president, President Trump, is subverting all the values that I've stood for all my life. That is why I prepared this manuscript for all Americans to read. I felt that it was critical to reach as many people as possible with a simpler, more concise form of the Mueller report. The original report was 449 pages. Took me about 2 weeks to read it, and I will admit it was extremely aggravating to me. So let me continue. I wanted to make it possible that by reaching a wider audience with this extraordinary material prepared by the Mueller report, that I would join many others who are trying to expose this important document to the American people. And it is and was an uphill battle. The Attorney General at the time, Barr, he prepared a 4-pager that was a bunch of lies on the Mueller report, and nobody refuted them. Nobody. When I spoke to Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House at the time, in 2019, right after I published the book, she said she found that the premise that my followers would want to impeach him based on the Mueller report interesting. I knew she was not going to impeach him based on the Mueller report. I also knew that the impeachment committee assembled at the time was not going to impeach him based on the Mueller report. I had sent every one of them a copy of my book. Not one thanked me. Not one acknowledged they got a copy. But I believe, and I believe then, and I believe now, that our democracy was at stake, and if you're going to impeach somebody, you use whatever means you have to bring that person to justice. So, let me discuss why I wrote the book. I have an introduction, I have a preamble, I have volume 1 synopsized of the Mueller report. I've got the new Financial Times article, Trump's Russian Connections, by Michael Scott and Catherine Belton, written on December 13th, 2016. I've got the Mueller Report Volume 2, my editorials on what I felt at the time were going to be the consequences of not impeaching Trump, and a modified glossary. So let me begin with my introduction. I truly care about the preservation of our democracy and the state of our union. That's why I chose to write the synopsis of the Mueller report. Once Robert Mueller published his report, I had read it to understand the facts behind the Russian intervention in our 2016 elections. And after reading the Mueller report, which I read a grueling 8 hours a day for a solid week, taking meticulous notes, I wanted to understand Mueller's facts behind Russia's intervention in our 2016 election and the cooperative behavior between candidate Trump and how Russian intervention elevated Trump to the presidency. Now, as I have always done throughout my career, I sought to understand why a future president of these United States would accept a foreign power's help without question. And he did. And I remain stunned because he's still accepting Russian help. In fact, if you looked at the papers recently, and this is now 2026, you will see the FSB has an entire building dedicated to election interference. May not be just ours. We were certainly the proving grounds. I read the Mueller report in its entirety. It stirred feelings in me of both patriotism and a strong desire to create a document for everyone to read and understand easily. I crafted a synopsis based on my notes, and I sincerely hope that you will feel like I did after reading this version of the Mueller report. We must pursue justice to preserve our democracy. We, the people, are entitled to know all the facts about Trump's Russian connections that are detailed in the Mueller report, Volume 1. Volume 2 provides the roadmap for obstruction of justice, listing the many instances of obstruction by the president during his administration, linking those instances to incidents that took place in Volume 1, because Volume 2 establishes the case for impeachment. It also details the many, many grand jury indictments. We, the people, are entitled to know all the facts about Trump's Russian connections that are detailed in Mueller's report, Volume 1. Volume 2 provides the roadmap for obstruction of justice by listing the many instances of obstruction by the president during his administration, linking those instances to incidents that took place in Volume 1. Finally, on my editorial page, I have provided my own thoughts as a result of this very intense experience. I passionately believe Congress should begin the process of impeachment immediately, based on the obstruction of justice facts laid out in the Mueller report, Volume 2. This action, in turn, would allow Congress and the American people to see the entire Mueller report, all the connections between Trump, his children, the Russians, Putin, and WikiLeaks, and how they set out to destroy Hillary Clinton and degrade our election system. This action of obstruction of justice, in turn, would allow Congress and the American people to see the Mueller report. It would negate attorney-client privilege and assure that all witnesses called would provide truthful commentary or legally be held in contempt. Once the case for obstruction of justice proceeds, pending impeachment, the House of Representatives becomes a co-equal branch of government with independent rights. I was hopeful that the Mueller report was strong enough to carry impeachment with it, and with the education of the American public. I thought that Trump's crimes would be brought before the public, and the public would agree that he should indeed be impeached. This never happened, and that's why I am going to read you my synopsis. I really thought, then and only then, after reading the Mueller report, would we meaning we the people of the United States, have a picture of what went on, and I believe that all the American people would support impeachment of this president without a doubt. Most truly yours, Joyce Silver.